Hello again. This is the second video in my series. Last time we went over NPV, which I believe, and actually all literature indicates that the NPV is the best tool to use when determining investments or capital investments. However, you will find in practice a lot of people still like to look at the IRR, that's the internal rate of return. So I thought I'd do a quick, um, how to calculate it in Excel and what it really means. Just as NPV, I've also noticed out in the real world, I'll use for a lack of better words, people misusing it, not really understanding what the percent is telling you. So first, let's calculate it for this one we did last time. So here we are. This is what we did last time. This was our NPV calculation. As you can see, we have a required rate of return 5%, and we calculated NPV two ways. We did it manually by calculating the discounted cash flows by year and summing them, and then we also used the NPV function in Excel. There's the NPV function, and so a lot of times you'll see somebody will at the bottom there say, hey, IRR. Okay, so there you go. IRR in Excel is very easy to calculate. In fact, I'm not even going to show you how to do it manually because it actually isn't all that. It is actually somewhat a repetitive or an iterative process to do it manually, and I don't see a benefit of calculating it manually for you guys. So you do an IRR to bring up the function, and it asks for the values. And again, it's your net cash values. And now, different from NPV, you include all values, starting with your year zero, and you select all your values. And I just ended there. It asked for a guess, but I've never really have had that really change my answer. So I would do that, and you get 8%. And I'm going to expand it a little bit. So what does that IRR really mean? What is that telling you? Excuse me. IRR is telling you that what discount rate you would use to make your NPV 0, right? So, and any NPV of 0 or greater, the theory goes, you would invest in the project. So just to prove that out, I'm currently have an NPV of 1,582. I am going to set it to my IRR, and there you see we have an NPV of 0. Okay, so that's what the IRR is. It says at a discount rate of 8.1442%, that is your NPV is 0, which you would then still conduct a project. Let me put it back though. What it also is telling you that if the IRR is in excess of your cost of capital or your required rate of return, which in this case I use 5%, the IRR is in excess of 5%, then you would proceed with the project. However, just to point out, let's say my, let's say my cost of capital was 10%. Well, as you know, the NPV says, hey, don't do it. You got a negative NPV. But based on these cash flows, if my required return was 10%, your IRR is less than that, so you would not proceed with the project. So it really tells you the same information as the NPV, but I assume that people like it in the workplace because they do like to see things in terms of percentages. And it is a fairly easy decision to say, well, if my cost of capital is 10%, right, so therefore my IRR is less, right, than less than 10%, then you would not do the project. Now, if your cost of capital was like we had originally pondered with this thing, right, your IRR is greater than 5%, you would do the project. So there's my real quick intro on the internal rate of return. Okay, let's talk about another common one that you might see out in the workplace. Payback period. So first, let's just calculate it. It's actually kind of a fairly simple calculation. Okay. So the first thing you have to consider is I'm investing my 10,000. You look at the number of whole years or periods that you are receiving net cash to make it back. So if I just, let's make Excel great, I can look in here and go, okay, in year 6 I have 9,000 in inflows, and then I have 10,500 in year 7. So at that point we know it happens sometime between year 6 and 7. But the question, of course, is what is the exact payback period? So first thing I'm going to do is I'll do my full year's calculation, and it's obviously just going to be equal the sum of your through the first 6 years, and of course you're going to get you found an error. There we go. So there you go. There's 9,000 payback. Then in year 7, remind yourself here, of course, is you need to get paid back 10,000, and you already have 9,000, which means you need $1,000 paid back in year 7. Year 7, you get 1,500. So if you do 1,000 equals 1,000 divided by 1,500, you get 0.6, so 2/3 of the year. I'll just make this. Okay. So, so essentially, you just combine those. So you know it took you 6 years to make 9,000. So E equals the 6 plus your partial year. So your payback period is 6.67. Okay. You know, these are various calculations. And of course, you can do this in one cell. You can do all this, but I'm just doing it, I'm expanding it to make sense to you. Now, with the problem with that payback period that we just calculated of 6.67 years is it ignores a couple things. One is it ignores the time value of money. None of that's discounted. And secondly, it also ignored the cash flows after year 6. You know, your investment goes 10 years. So it says, hey, in 6 point, I'm paid back. There you go. So not a very good measure that's your sole reason for investing in a project. Now you can do discounted payback, which takes away one of those problems. So you would use your discounted cash flows. And in this case, I think we get to about year 8. There it is, 9,000, right? So we'll sum this up to year 8. And I'm not sure why I keep getting this error message, because formula looks correct to me, but so you get 9,694.82. Now, and again, I believe we did that through year 8, correct? So in year 9, you are going to need to get an additional $305.18. And in year 9, your discounted is 966.91. So you would then just having a little Excel error here. So then you would divide that, and I'm doing it in one formula, by your cash flow. And it's telling you it's 0.32 of a year. So just as we had said, your total, that is from year 8, so it would equal 8 plus your partial year. So it's 8.3 years. And that's your payback period. Now, I suppose, you could take, somebody might say, well, what's 8.3 years? You know, you could convert that to months, right? You could say, um, you know, so you would say, uh, first thing you'd want to figure out, and again, this is not important, but what is 0.32 of a year? Well, how many months is that? Well, a year is 12 months times 12. Excuse me, 0.32. So that's 3.84 months. So it's almost 4 months. Um, but I think, you might want to just round it. That's like, you know, you could say, that's around the first quarter, start of the second quarter. Um, but that is how you figure out payback period. And I don't really want to get much more into it. I think when we go further in this series, I'm not going to pay too much attention to it. Might calculate it as a nice to know. Just be aware that I see out in practice a lot of companies will say they make rules based on investment. I want to see this paid back in 2 years. So now you kind of have, it needs to show a positive NPV, and then it has to pay back in 2 years. I can see a problem with that because what if you pay yourself back in 2 years, but then you have another huge cash outlay thereafter? But yeah, so you're going to see when we get into this, there's going to be various rules and hurdles that companies set for investment. It's not as simple as just, okay, my NPV is greater than zero. We're going to do it. But I just kind of wanted to give you, again, this is just the intro of how to calculate these things, what you might see on people's spreadsheets or presentations when they're practicing this. All right, as always, please like this video and leave a comment, and of course subscribe to the channel. And if you do have any questions, you can leave a comment, or I do have my email address where you can write me, and I'll try to answer your question or give you some help if possible. Take care.